Well, it's time for another issue of Fighting Matters, where we look at the intersection between combat sports and far-right fascism. And we've got a special guest on, it's Nate Quarry, a UFC fighter, beat the crap out of Caleb Stearns in the famous Running Man match long time ago. And I think it's undeniable that the UFC has become progressively farther right wing and now MAGA. It started out, as far as I can tell, in 2001 when Dana White allowed the UFC to have an event at Atlantic City. And then by the 2016, we had Dana White talking at the Republican National Convention. In 2020, he campaigned for Trump. He was given certainly Trump supported him trying to reopen the UFC in the middle of a pandemic. By the time we get to 2024, he's again campaigning for Trump. We got Joe Rogan essentially campaigning for Trump. We've got Dana White speaking at rallies and speaking at the victory speech. And now in 2025, we've got ideas being floated by Kash Patel that the UFC training centers are going to be involved in training FBI agents. And if that's not a way to funnel money from the government purse into private pockets, I don't know what is. But I think I start out with a question here, and then we got other people as well. Do you agree with that assessment, or is this just my own deluded fantasy that the UFC is becoming progressively more right wing and MAGA?
Very much so. It used to be at the beginning, you didn't talk about politics. Dana White made it very clear that you did not talk about politics because you did not want to uh, have half of the country not want to be associated with you. But things have gone definitely progressively more and more to the right. And I think it's very clear, as you said, Trump hosted UFC I Fought in Atlantic City at one of the Trump casinos back in the day. Who did I fight there? I think it was shoot, the guy with 100 fights. Oh, his
I
name
love
is,
how everyone back in the day had, 100 fights. That was the way. It was all about volume back in the 90s and the early 2000s.
yeah.
Shannon the Cannon?
No.
Crazy Horse?
Boy. He fought Matt Serra, knocked out Matt Serra with the spinning elbow.
Shoney Carter.
Shoney
No,
Carter.
that guy.
I fought Shoney Carter in Atlantic City. And I had read Trump's book at the time, whatever that was called. Uh, so that's all I knew about him. All I knew really was to find out later the propaganda that was written in that book, and next to none of it was true. But what I remember about being at Trump's casino was I was used to the casinos in Las Vegas, which were just beautiful, and you come there and you lose all your money. Trump's casinos, the bathrooms were always filthy. There was just urine all over the floor all the time. They were just dirty. You go into the casino, it was like something back in the 70s. Just, it stunk. It was old. It just did not look inviting. And I remember thinking to myself, this isn't quite the picture that he painted for himself in the book that I read.
Are you talking about Trump or about his casinos?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, man. It's I'd love to know a little bit more about what it was like at that time, because yeah, you're right. The UFC used to be more apolitical than it is now, and it's been actually kind of shocking. I mean, not that Dana White or that MMA fighters have a political preference. I mean, I don't begrudge anyone for making those decisions, even if I disagree with them. But what has been very interesting is this sudden change into basically kind of positioning the UFC almost as a marketing engine for the Trump administration and for MAGA. That's a relatively new and relatively recent thing. Were there any indications of that even back in the day, or had none of that happened around the time that you were an active fighter there?
It wasn't quite so blatant, but if you look at the origin story and who these people are at their core, like I think about myself as a voter, as a husband, as a father, as a man. What are the issues that are most important to me? Number one for me, I would say, is healthcare. I'm concerned about the cost of healthcare. That can be a huge chunk of expenses. We're on the Oregon Health Plan, which is a socialized plan, which has had its problems, but overall has been incredible and is saving my family easily $20,000, $30,000 a year. That's something very concerned for me. And if a politician comes up and says, "Hey, we want to bring Medicare for all, we want to deal with these healthcare costs, we're spending 10x for insulin, what Canadians are," I'm going to listen. If you're a wealthy person, you don't necessarily care about that because you can afford healthcare, you can afford groceries, you can afford a big house. In fact, in my opinion, money has almost become meaningless because there is so much of it for the wealthy. Back before Reagan, when we had this climbing tax rate, when as you made more money, that amount of money got taxed slightly higher. What was it, a 70% progressive tax rate? Let's be clear, the rich people were still incredibly rich. They could still buy whatever they wanted. But then all of those tax burdens came off. Now money became almost meaningless to them. If you have enough to buy a house and have plenty left over, you're
Or
going
to
to,
send Katy Perry to space.
yeah,
Mhm.
you're going to spend so much more money to where then what are the wealthy concerned about? They're worried about people taking away what they have. They're worried about crime on those types of levels. So it's so interesting to me to watch the Trump campaign and Trump in that whole genre of people rail against the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, everyone that would look at their corruption and the laws that they, as white collar criminals, are breaking. But what do they prop up then? The police, the people on the streets. Well, nobody's busting, no cop on the beat is busting down Trump's door and saying, "Hey, you falsified your tax records on these buildings, we're hauling you in." No, that's a long, drawn out process. But the police are going to go clean up the streets using this war on drugs, or what should be called more the war on the poor, these types of things. So if you look at what the wealthy are concerned about, they're concerned about keeping their wealth, keeping the poor people from taking their wealth. And they look down so much on that. In my experience, too, I think nobody would argue with me that I've had a challenging journey at times. And I see a lot of people that have also had difficult journeys to get where they are if they reach some level of success. And then they usually have one of two responses. My response is, "Man, I worked my ass off. I went through a lot of stuff. I had back surgery, was raised in an abusive cult, yada, 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 all these things. I would really like to see other people not have to work so hard to achieve a level of success." The other response to that is, "Oh my God, I worked my ass off. Those fucking losers can't get their shit together. So why should we try to help them? I'm going to step on them because it sucks to be them." And
It's always
it amazes me that people will have that kind of mindset that you work so hard to accomplish something. And even myself, a lot of my motivation was just rage, just pure anger at how I was raised, at how I was restricted from living my life, from all of these things. And then I got into fighting. I got this outlet for rage. I was able to build my own self esteem, build my ego, turn around my life to where I live in a decent neighborhood. It's a good house, wonderful, beautiful, loving, kind wife. I have amazing children. Why do I want to carry around all that anger still and look down on people? And I feel like, our armchair psychiatrist here, if I'm looking at Dana, I'm going to say probably the same thing. You had a rough life, probably picked on as a kid, probably abusive childhood. And I see this all the time. As a Gen Xer, my grandfather beat the shit out of my father. My father reduced that level of abuse probably 80, 90%. It was still too much. He didn't learn how to hug me, tell me he loved me, or he was proud of me, but he did what he could. And I see that across the Gen X group more often than not, where those hardcore working class fathers beat on their kids a little too much. And it gave them that rage, but at that same time, that rage gave them some drive to make something of themselves. But with a part of the purses that I earn, a part of the money that I earned, I set aside a little bit of it to go to therapy, to help me deal with these issues, to understand, oh, I was a victim. I should not have been treated that way. How can I make things better for my kids? How can I be a better man, a better father, a better husband? And I see too many people that are still just feeding off that rage and looking down on people. And once you get that level of success, then they all come together because then all they want is more. Then it just becomes a game. Well, how much do I have? And I like to say I have no thank you money, which to me means if I want to go out to eat, I can go out to eat. I don't have to look at my checking account. That was my whole financial goal. So if somebody comes up to me and is like, hey, I want you to do something degrading and demeaning and I'm going to pay you some money, I can say, no, thank you. I'm good. I'm okay. I have food money. My kids have clothes. I'm all right. Jeff Bezos has fuck you money, billions and billions of dollars. All of those guys have so much money. And I believe it was Bezos just today on Amazon, they started showing what the tariffs were going to do to the cost of the goods coming into America. All it took was one phone call from Big Daddy Trump saying, hey, I don't like that. Oh, sorry, Mr. Trump. I will take that down right away. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Because all of that money, the billions of dollars that he has, will never fill that black spot in his soul. It's never going to let him say to himself, I'm good enough. I'm fine. I'm a good man. I take care of my loved ones. I take care of my kids. I'm setting an example. I want to change the world for the better. They still have this black hole inside of them and they're trying to fill it with nonsense. My truck is 21 years old and I'm fine with that because it gets me where I need to go. I just had the front end repainted. It starts every time. I want it to look good, but I do not care if my neighbors look at me and say, why is he driving such an old truck? He must not be successful. I don't care what you think of me. You don't pay my bills. I don't answer to you. I can't imagine having untold billions, more wealth than anyone in the history of the world has had, and it's still not being enough, where you need to show off to everyone else. Uh, Rush Limbaugh died a while back, and I saw this comment and I thought it was so brilliantly put. And I would say this is probably the first time anybody's brought Rush Limbaugh up on your program, or you've heard his name in quite a while, because nobody cares. He died and is forgotten. All he was a purveyor of hatred and fear mongering. Those people, they come and they shine, they get all the people who are already angry, have this misplaced fear and hatred and don't know where to put it. And he directs it into an easy little place for them. Oh, it's the immigrants that are taking my work. Oh, it's the gays, they're unnatural. This guy wants to be called a man and that's a woman. Oh, that's all my race. And I'm sitting over here going, how have any of those people affected your life at all? I had somebody tell me, and they named the person that was. I don't know the story completely, so forgive me, but it was a man who started competing in a woman's swimming thing, and I don't know if it was a real trans person or somebody trying to game the system or what. But the person my buddy brought this person's name up to me. It was like by name. This person is pretending to be a woman, and he's taking women's college scholarships away. I was like, do you understand? You know that person's name because there's only one of them. Can you name any of the children that were gunned down here in America last year? Can you give me one name? Because there was between 4 and 5 thousand of them that were slaughtered in our schools and our streets. 4 to 5 thousand of them, but you don't give a shit about any of them because you've been programmed not to care about that because that's the price of freedom. We just have to accept that, every once in a while you're going to send your kid off to school and they're not going to come home because that's freedom. Hold on, though. This man wants to call himself a woman. Oh, ho, ho. We cannot allow that to happen. And I'm sitting here going, stop fighting the culture war, fight the class war. No immigrant took your job. The person that hired him took your job. And if you Google this, I like to believe everything that I say. There's a reason for it. I've done some research on it. I've looked it up. All of these red states that are talking about we need to get these migrant workers out of here. The easiest way in the world to do it, I can fix it with one keystroke of a pen. Arrest the employers. It'll be that simple. For every illegal immigrant that you have hired in your business, the CEO, let's just say, does 1 month in prison. It'll be over in a day. Oh, but they don't actually do that now, do they? And the states where they have thrown out all the immigrants, they see their economy come crashing down. Alabama lost billions of dollars of that. We're on the start of a massive recession. And yet people are still so busy, so confused, fighting this culture war. And I'm sitting here just astounded that people have been sucked into this and conned into this when they're getting their pockets picked by the ruling class.
I don't know where the quote comes from, but there is a quote saying that the essence of conservatism is to distract poor and working class people with culture war issues while you give tax cuts and regulation cuts to the rich. And that ties together what you've just been saying, because you've got the Jeff Bezoses, the Dana Whites, the Elon Musks of the world concerned about keeping all of their billions, and I think pretty soon trillions. And how do you get poor people to vote for tax cuts for the rich? It's to get them so upset about, it's to have Joe Rogan go and talk about this mythical kitty litter, this girl who identifies as a furry peeing in a kitty litter box. And yeah, it's my daughter's friend. It's always my daughter's friend, and it never turns out to be true. But if you're really upset about some furry peeing in a kitty litter box, she identifies as a furry, or this idea that they're coming for your kid and they want to turn your kid, they have an agenda to turn every kid trans, then you'll vote for things that are inherently terrible for your own self-interest economically.
Yeah, something that you brought up, Nate, which I'm really glad that you did, because we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. The one thing that really surprised me about the ultra wealthy and how they responded to this second Trump administration, look, I was never under the illusions that these were good people. I never thought Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos are wonderful folks. I just don't think you can accumulate that much wealth unless you're really exploiting someone along the way. But what really surprised me was how quickly, when they realized that Trump was going to get elected, how quickly they just abandoned everything that they had thrown out as their moral compass before and just did a complete 180. It was I can't even really think of a word to describe it. It was breathtaking. Like, it actually made me, I felt vertigo seeing this happen. Like, oh my God, there has been a seismic shift around me in terms of how the world works. It felt like when you're in a car and it lurches all of a sudden. I physically felt uncomfortable by what I was seeing, because all of these people who had spent, the past 6-7 years talking about the importance of, inclusion in the workplace and standing up for the right thing and being a good social citizen as a corporation and, all of this other talk. All of a sudden, just overnight, suddenly Mark Zuckerberg is rebranded and now he's a surf bro who thinks Facebook needs to be masculine. And just overnight, Jeff Bezos, a company that had been fighting the Washington Post had been fighting tooth and nail with Trump up until this point. But as soon as, the minute he got elected, suddenly, you know what, we're not going to do any of this DEI stuff before. It was almost like, you know how when you see a bunch of gas stations and they say, oh, we're not price fixing, but all of a sudden they all change their price at the exact same time, at the exact same second. So we're not price fixing, but clearly they are. It really felt like there was some sort of corporate collusion between all of these billionaires, because they all went mask off at exactly the same time. And that was really shocking to me, because I was never under the impression that these billionaires really cared about social justice or anything. But to see them all rip off their masks at once and basically, now, surprise, everything we told you we believe in for the last 8 years, it was a lie. It was just a lie of convenience. We're MAGA now. That was terrifying to me, because that is how fascist governments rise, is when the ultra wealthy class just decides, mask off, we are now part of this administration, even though nobody elected us to be part of it.
What scares me even more so is the cowardice involved, right? As you said, these are people that have money beyond a scale that most of us can even conceive of. It is true fuck you money. And yet Jeff Bezos could easily say, you know what, we are going to publicize exactly how much these tariffs are costing people, because we can do it, and because it's true, and because I have $300 billion. And if I suddenly have $150 billion, oh no, I can only buy Bolivia instead of Chile, right? And they still don't. And what that says to me is that, and I don't think this is going to surprise anybody on this call, I think there are two types of people that experience bullying. I think there are people that conclude that bullying is bad and I'm going to stand up against it and I'm going to do the hard work on myself to make sure that I'm a responsible citizen. Or you learn it's better to be the bully and it's better to be friends with the bully. And that's what Bezos did. And that's what the rest of them did. It's going to be easier, right? And I have such contempt for that as someone who, I grew up, Nate and I were talking about where I came from. I grew up working on farms and in fields from like 12 years old, worked with a lot of immigrants. Some of them were documented, some of them weren't. Those people worked their asses off. And they were trying to work their ass off to make a better life for themselves and their family. And so for somebody who has literally enough money to end homelessness tomorrow if they just choose to, or one of the few people that has the economic and social power and the media power but don't get me started on Elon buying Twitter and buying literally the means of communication. But like for one of the few people in the world that has the resources and the ability to have, like, I have fuck you money, I'm going to be all right, to not stand up to an authoritarian government is, it's beneath
Well,
contempt.
Trump was threatening to put Zuckerberg in jail. So that is the other thing and it's not entirely impossible,
No.
right? Like, so that there is oh no, I'm only going to have $100 billion as opposed to $200 billion. But there is also the threat of you're going to get arrested and go to jail, or so that
Bring it, bring it. He has private jets. Can you imagine that? He would just fly to another country, buy that country. If your morals are for sale, then you have no morals. And I see these people that are just willing to bend over at just these whims of a hollow, broken man. People always talk about going back in time and shooting Hitler. I'm going to go back in time and hug Trump just to let him know, hey, I'm sorry your father's a piece of shit that has never hugged you, never told you were worthy of love, that is a blatant racist, that is just ugly and evil. You can be better. Take the hundreds of millions of dollars he's illegally gifting you and do good things with it. But no, it's easier for him to go hang out with Epstein and to rape little girls and to do all these other things. It's just astounding to me. And the evidence is so clear. And I have just lost my mind talking to people that I've known for decades now, that I have respected, that I have truly enjoyed their company, and see them fall into this cult way of thinking. And it brought me back to something I had never thought of before. So I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, a doomsday cult. First 20 years of my life, I was knocking on people's doors, trying to sell them the Watchtower and Awake and convert them to my religion. That's how I was raised. That's all that I knew. I had to undergo my own cult deprogramming to get to the life where I am now. And that is its own story. But I bring this up because I was born in, my siblings were not. So around 1970 or so, my parents converted to Jehovah's Witnesses. I grew up down the driveway from my grandparents, my great grandmother, and my aunt. At some point, my parents had a conversation with them that went something like, hey, we're now Jehovah's Witnesses. You no longer get to celebrate any holidays with your grandchildren. Your grandkids are going to believe that God is going to kill you because you're bad people. And there's literally nothing that you can do that is going to change this. And I can just imagine my grandparents going, oh my God, what did we do wrong here? How can we fix this? How can we change this? But they couldn't. And I'm seeing that, I'm feeling that same way, talking with people I've known for over 20 years. And I'm seeing them fall into this cult way of thinking. And it's just, no matter what I bring up, it's, nope, that's fake news. Nope, that's not real. I'm like, you're being lied to. Blatantly lied to. Here are the facts. Nope, that's all fake news. It is
so
just
Nate, how do we know that we're not in a cult though? Because that gets thrown right back at us. You leftist or postmodernist, Marxist, leftist, soy libtards are in your own cult. How do we
because
know that we're not in a cult?
if you show me something as a gotcha moment, I will read it. I will watch the video. I will do research on it. There has been times when people have pointed out that I was wrong in my way of thinking, and I went into a deep dive and I was like, oh, thank you for educating me. I can clearly see that your sources are correct here, and I was mistaken. Like I always tell people when we're having a discussion or a disagreement, I say, these are my beliefs and the worst case scenario. And Stefan, I may have said this to you as well. I'm gonna say what I think. If you disagree, bring your evidence. The worst case scenario is also the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, I was wrong. Best case scenario, I get to be right next time because I've learned, I've changed. And as I'm sharing this information, a friend of mine I've known for over 20 years brought him into working for the UFC, introduced him to MMA, very successful in it now. He believes that the election was stolen from Trump, whenever that was, 2020 or so. Uh, I sent him just this great. I told him you should turn on 60 Minutes. It's a great news program talking about the election. There's all these Republican governors, all these Republicans who are talking about how the election was not stolen at all. He would not even entertain the idea of watching 60 Minutes. those guys, they're fake news. They're lying. They edited Kamala Harris and her. Trump is suing them. I'm not watching that. Everything that I sent to him, that's fake news. I'm not going to watch that. And I'm sitting here just going, do you hear yourself? You won't even listen to the argument. You're attacking the source just as fake news. Whereas everything that you send me, I look at it, even no matter how ridiculous it is. It's dumbfounding to me. But that's how I grew up in a cult. We were taught we do not look at outside sources of information because that is a tool of Satan. The devil is trying to work his way into us. And when you have lies such as Democrats believe in post-birth abortion, murdering newborn children, when you have that repeated by the president of the United States and people who believe him, then there is nothing worse than that. I'm not going to believe you Democrats because you murder babies. Hey, that doesn't happen. Liar, liar, President Trump told me you murder babies. Can you show me one example of where this happened? Murderer, murderer. Like, my God, you're living in a world that is so removed from reality, it's just insane. And when people are so drawn into that, I just don't know what it would take to save them because everything that I have tried has just failed miserably.
I'm so glad that you use the C word here, cult, because this is something that has come up a lot in jiu-jitsu. I've spoken on BJJ Mental Models many times about the cult-like tactics that a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms use to control their students. I mean, you see a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms that'll do, I mean, not even getting into things like loyalty and purity tests. There are gyms that straight up baptize their students, right? It's fucking weird. And I think we can say, at least I can say with absolute conviction, that MAGA is a cult. And I'm not the only person who believes this. I mean, Stephen Hassan, one of the world-leading experts on cult tactics and deprogramming, wrote a whole book called The Cult of Trump, specifically about this, because a big part of MAGA involves the rejection of all other sources of information. I mean, a perfect example. MAGA is now convinced that the Associated Press is like some woke, political, biased news source simply because Trump is mad at them because they're calling the Gulf of Mexico by its proper name. For those who don't know, like I don't know to what extent the AP really gets play in the U.S., but the Associated Press is easily one of the most respected, unbiased news organizations in the world, full stop, right? If you want a source of news that you can trust, the AP is probably your best bet if you're really concerned about bias. But all it took was like one truth or tweet or whatever the fuck they call it now from Trump criticizing them, and then suddenly it's like a little switch in everyone's brain gets flipped, and now the AP is bad. And that was a thought that these MAGA people did not have even just a few months ago until Trump told them to think that way, and then without question, they just gobbled it up. And as a Canadian, I feel this too, right? I went from, I mean, you know, I run a jiu-jitsu business. I work with tons of Americans. Probably our biggest clientele is Americans. Probably the majority of our guests are Americans. I had never heard an American say a cross word about their neighboring country up north, really in this entire community. And then all it took was Trump talking about this 51st state, Canada's abusing us nonsense. And then suddenly people that I know, I thought I knew quite well, people who I went out of my way to help support them in their businesses are suddenly telling me that I'm a freeloader and my country is taking advantage of them. And there's no rational thinking. It's just programming. And to your point, Nathan, I have absolutely no idea how you deal with that. How do you deprogram someone who is convinced that the truth is a lie? How do you reach someone who does not believe in reality? And that I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows.
You know, there's a professor of journalism here. The AP gets a lot of play down here in the States. It's for those, it's a wire service. And so, you know, in terms of, it's the best example of trained professionals that also rely on the wisdom of crowds. It's rigorously vetted, rigorously fact-checked. There's a thing called AP style that governs the way that journalists sort of write. So really important. And I don't think there's any way to say that the MAGA movement is not a cult. And there's a new poll out today to the point about Canada. And, you know, I live in Bellingham on the opposite side of the border from Steve and Stefan. And my perception is the same as yours, Steve. Like, always a great relationship between the two countries, always a great relationship between the people, as long as I've been alive. New Washington Post poll out today. And it's a very interesting poll, pretty robust sample size, about 2,300 people. The Post chose to lead with one headline that I would not have led with, but I see why they did, which is, so largely Americans, even Republicans, oppose the vast majority of Trump's policies. And we're talking about all the flagship policies. They broke it out in a chart. Even Republicans oppose things like tariffs, things like the lack of due process. The only thing that Republicans slightly favor, they're still on board of the deportation train. But all the other stuff, even Republicans are like, yeah, that's kind of silly. The stuff that chilled me was, so about 86% of Americans oppose an invasion of Canada. It's 99% of regular folks. Only 71% of Republicans said they did. 27% flat out said, yes, we support the forcible annexation of Canada. So 27%, like almost a third of the Republican Party, is like, we want to go to war with one of our oldest allies in an aggressive war that we didn't start. And we want to invade this country that we've had partnership with for more than a century, and that's chilling. And like you said, Steve, it turned on a dime. If you had told any of us a year ago, like just a year, I mean, even 6 months ago, like, hey, Trump's going to threaten to invade Greenland and Canada, and a bunch of people are going to be like, yeah, all right. By the way, 45% of Republicans support an invasion of Greenland.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and all too believable at the same time, right? It's a cult. There's no way it's not.
There was I just saw a video of somebody, I think he was at a MAGA rally or something, and he was kind of doing some of the gotcha points, and he went up to a woman saying, why did you vote for Trump? And she goes on this rant about how during Biden's term, her taxes went up every single year. And she just hated that. She was so angry. And the gotcha kid was like, these were Trump's policies that he put into action. They went up every year because that's part of his tax plan. And it could not be done away with until year 4 was done. And of course, the woman just started screaming, I'm never voting for a fucking Democrat. And then the response was, you're in a cult. You're never going to win somebody over with the gotcha moments. But I've also had the very calm conversations when I used to try and make the effort. I had a buddy, and this was before Trump was elected the first term, and he was 100%, I'm a Republican because Obama is going to run for a third term. And I said what I always say, man, that sounds terrible. Let's look it up. Let's see if there's any nuances we're not aware of. Oh, he said this as a joke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It was literally a roast. Everybody was joking about it. Didn't change his mind. What was the other one? Obama is trying to cut meals for our military down to just 2 a day, just breakfast and dinner, getting rid of lunch. Fuck that guy. He hates the military. Wow, that sounds terrible. Let's look it up. Let's see if there's any nuances we're not aware of. Oh, this is as the military is leaving one area, and I've been on these military bases. They have full King's Table buffets for every single meal, 4 of them a day. So now they're only going to have 2 full buffets a day, and then cold sandwiches and everything else for a late night snack and a lunchtime. So, and I'm telling them, so you've been lied to. You're being conned here. They're just making you angry over nothing. And what really kind of ended our friendship was when Trump was getting elected, and I sent him a text and said, man, Obama better hurry up running for that third term. Ha ha ha. He lost his shit to the point where I had to block him on his text messages because he was just losing his mind that someone would dare to question the lies that he so easily believed. I just keep going back to this. It's just so unbelievable to me. And I think so much of it is the Republicans are so great at messaging and the Democrats are terrible at messaging. Defund the police. Oh my God, they want to do away with all the police. If somebody said that to me or said, hey, how can you convince somebody of this argument? I would say, well, the United States has around 5% of the Earth's population. We have around 25% of the world's prison population. We have 5 times as many people locked up as we should. You're more likely to go to prison in the free United States than any other country in the world. But it works. Once you're in prison, you never come back. We have nearly a 90% recidivism rate. Nearly 9 in 10 people that have gone to prison go back to prison. But at least it's cheap, right? No, we have for-profit prisons. Costs $50,000, $60,000 a year to house one person. And we have millions of them locked up. Does this seem like a process that is working? Could we maybe change something? Maybe redirect some of our funds, maybe address this war on drugs, things like this. But instead, we get caught with this defund the police. Now, the Republicans, they come out with, we need small government. Do you need Uncle Sam telling you how to live your life and how to run your business? No, you don't. You're a free American. And so I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who was falling down this rabbit hole. And he was talking about, we need to get rid of the EPA. The EPA, man, it's crushing small businesses, all this government oversight. I said, well, why do you want to get rid of the EPA? Well, I wanted to put a well on my property and all these things that I had to do, all these hoops I had to go through to make this happen. It was just ridiculous. We need to do away with the EPA. And I said, okay, well, let me just give you a scenario here. Let's just say you decide you want to put a well on your property and the city says no. And this lawyer knocks on your door and says, hey, you're an American and a goddamn American should be able to put a well on their own American piece of property. You pay your goddamn taxes. Who are they to tell you what you can do? I'm going to take this pro bono. I'll fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it gets all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is extremely conservative now, and they agree. Americans should be able to do what Americans want to do on American property. And so now anybody can put in a well that they want to. Well, lawyers don't work for free. So you find out that Nestle was the one that was funding that lawyer. The CEO of Nestle is famous as saying, Americans do not have a right to water. So then Nestle came in and put in a water bottling plant right next to your piece of property. And there was no law saying he couldn't. Now your well has dried up as well as everybody else's. And now they're spending $3 on a bottle of water. Do you understand what the EPA has done? No, you don't, because we haven't been around before it. American rivers used to catch on fire. They were so polluted. In the 1960s, all of these companies, they would just dump their waste, their oil, whatever was toxic, into the river. And it was just a known thing. Sometimes rivers would just catch on fire. And then EPA came along and it ended that. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. All of these protections that we have as workers, what are the Republicans trying to do? They're trying to get rid of OSHA, safety and hazard standards. Why? Because it costs them money. They do not give a fuck if you lose a hand or lose a life. Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, you had all these women working in a big building with no fire exits, no breaks, no trash consumption, any massive fire started, over 100 people died. To get the rights that we are gladly throwing away today, people died and they went on strike until the ruling class bent over, because we have the power. Quit being fucking cucks. Stand up and fight for it. I made the decision a long time ago when I decided to be a part of the UFC lawsuit. I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. Because at the end of the day, I look in the mirror and I see myself and I can say, you know what? I did what I believe was the right thing to do. I fought the good fight. I lost. I won. I can hold my head up high because I did what I believe is right. When I went to the Tough One reunion, for some reason we had like a 17-year reunion a few years ago.
Like a high school.
And the guys were, oh, that sure would be nice to be involved and be members of the UFC Hall of Fame. And everybody looked at me because they're never going to induct me in the UFC Hall of Fame because I'm currently suing the UFC and just settled a big case. And I looked at all of the fighters from season one and I said, you know what? I'm fighting for what I believe in. I'm doing what I believe is right. You guys want to get in the UFC Hall of Fame? Do it. Go for it. Take your shot. You can even leave me out. I don't really care about that recognition. I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing to do for the next generation of fighters. And it's such a simple thing. I've got food money. What more do I need? My kids have clothes. I'm teaching them morals. I'm teaching them to stand up for what they believe in and what is the right thing to do. And that's such a lost virtue these days, I feel.
Let me ask you a quick question. This is something I want to touch on the topic of the UFC, right? I mean, I don't know what the current numbers are. I admittedly have not followed the UFC for a long time, but one thing that I do know is that all fighters in the UFC are dramatically underpaid compared to what they should be making, compared to what any other athlete in any other sport would make, right? I mean, you compare dollar for dollar, how UFC fighters are compensated versus boxing, even versus pro wrestling, which is owned by the same parent company now and also dramatically underpays their talent. Even by those standards, the UFC is basement tier in terms of what they paid. I mean, I have had the fortunate benefit of training with and getting to know a lot of UFC fighters. And when they tell me what they're getting paid to do this for, I am constantly wondering why they even bother. I mean, if you're getting paid, I don't know what the current rates are, but I know people who they've said they get paid like, 10K to show, 10K to win. That's a fight that's going to take you months to prepare for. You have to pay a whole fight camp. You have to fly. You have to put yourself up, and you only get the full purse if you win. So if you lose, you only get half of that. If you're only getting paid 10K every 3-4 months, how the fuck do you make a living? And so you have this, and that's the majority of the fighters on UFC contract. I mean, yes, you get guys who are at the top of the card who make a lot more and are still frankly underpaid, but the majority of UFC fighters are basically incredibly undercompensated for the risks they have to take on and what they do. But at the same time, the company is run by this unbelievably rich class of millionaire, billionaire types who are completely in bed with the current government at this point right now, right? To the point where, Dana and all of these guys are effectively a propaganda arm for the Trump administration. And I've always wondered, how the hell do you build a coalition like this? You've got all of these young, impressionable fighters who are willing to literally sacrifice their bodies for the entertainment of other people and for the profit of these billionaires. And they're willing to do it for like 5-10K a month. How does that work? And they're not even allowed to have sponsors anymore. That was taken away from them. How do these people ever get on the same page with people like Dana White, who are clearly just, raking it in at their expense? How do you build a coalition like this? It makes no sense to me. You've been on the inside. I'd love to get your insights on why, like a 25-year-old male athlete who is getting paid nothing would support these people. I just don't get it.
It's a tough one to really understand and quantify. And it used to be young men, their lives had meaning. They would have purpose. They're growing up in their village, their tribe. They're reaching adulthood. They're going on quests. They're hunting. The work that they do matters. And everybody in the village had a job that mattered. They were all important people. The person building the tents, they weren't less important than the people hunting, because you're going to freeze to death without that tent. Everybody had an important job. That's all faded away. What are the jobs that these young people can have today that give them meaning, that provide a future, that provide a home? They can't even afford to buy a home anymore. The prices of homes have just skyrocketed. And then they're looking at these wealthy people and they want to be like them, but they don't realize they're so much closer to the homeless camp down the street than they ever will be to the wealthy people. And so they're admiring this ruling class and then feeding off that energy that they're giving. Well, you deserve so much more. Not telling them we're the ones taking it away from you. You see this with the incels, the ones that are following the Tates, all those people. With me, every problem that I've ever had in my life, there's always one common denominator. It's me. Whether I'm the victim or not, for some reason, I'm in that situation. And I will have people quite often come up to me. Like I had somebody tell me a while back, I'm having a real hard time with my finances. I said, okay, so what's going on? Let's figure this out. Oh, my bank, they're just ripping me off. I can't believe how they're treating me. Oh, where do you bank at? Oh, I bank at the same bank. That's super odd. They're not ripping me off. How are they ripping you off? Oh, every month they're taking out all of these fines and all this and all that. So what's happening? They're just, just taking money out of your account. Well, I used the ATM and I'm overdrawn. I wrote these bad checks. Oh, you're not keeping track of how much money you have in your account. And the bank, well, their job is to make money, as much money as they possibly can. Your job is to not be a victim, to not be stupid. So let's do the work here. How much money do you have in your bank account? Well, I don't know. Well, why are you writing checks? Why are you going to the ATM? And what it came down to, I finally had to break them down to, I don't know what I'm doing with my money. I'm overdrawing my account. I'm making these mistakes. Okay, now we can start. Now that you've admitted you are at least part of the problem, now we can grow. That is a very tough thing for people to accept, that I am the reason a lot of my problems exist. It takes them looking inside of themselves, looking at how they respond to things. And I still do this to myself all the time. How am I going to respond? Am I going to respond with anger and hatred, or am I going to be calm? What kind of man do I want to be? How do I want to respond in this situation? It's difficult. It's so much easier just to be angry. I'm going to put on my tap out shirt that's 2 sizes too small, and I'm going to walk around with my sunglasses on, make sure everybody knows how tough I am. No, I'm going to put on my baggy sweatshirt and I'm going to talk softly, because I can always get angrier. I can always take the sweatshirt off. But if I start out with rage, it's very tough to de escalate from there. And I see these con men who are going after the young men, telling them that they're victims, but not who from. They're the ones taking advantage of you. How can we change this game? It is so much easier to be a tough guy, to be an asshole, than it is to be kind, to be supportive, to be vulnerable. Let's think about that. If I'm vulnerable, what does that mean? I'm opening myself to be hurt. Who's braver? The guy who goes into the Starbucks with the AR-15 strapped over his shoulder, ordering his mocha, looking all around. Is that a man? Is that bravery? Or is he a chicken shit coward trying to matter? I'd say the little kid that has to go to our shooting gallery schools is much braver. We need to give the young people a clear vision of what they're trying to achieve, what will make their lives matter. I remember back when I was younger and dumber. I'm with a friend and we were out at a bar or something like that, and I see somebody, some young man who I thought at the time I would call him like a girly man, just somebody who's not athletic, not a tough guy. And I was talking to my buddy. We're just kind of making fun of him to ourselves, not to the guy. Some girl walks by and I go, "Hey, would you ever be attracted to somebody like that?" And she looks at him and she looks at me and she goes, "I don't know. I don't know how he would treat me. I don't know if he's kind or what kind of a man he is." And 25 years later, I still think of that interaction where it was like, oh my God, I had it so wrong. I was looking at all these superficial things. How big is my truck? How much can I bench press? How tight is my shirt? And instead, in my relationship now, it's, well, how can I support my wife? How can I be a better father to my children than I had? What changes do I need to make to be a better man? So when people think of me, they think, that's a stand up guy. You can trust what he has to say. He has his morals. He's a good man. That's my goal. I don't give a shit if I'm not going to go on going to debt for $70,000 on a new truck so everybody knows how big and tough I am. I'm not wearing around a UFC jacket. Oh, I have the inside confidence that I never had as young men. And as a teenager, let me tell you something. I wasn't afraid of anything. You could have asked me and I would have told you I'm not afraid of anything. Because I remember I'm 17, I'm working on a painting crew, and I'm trying to get this ladder stable so I can go up and paint this eave 2 stories up. And I'm trying to get it. And one of the foremen on the side comes up and goes, "Oh, just get up there. What are you scared?" And I looked at him and went, "I'm not afraid of anything." I was shitting my pants. And I climbed up that ladder and I painted it. But I had to make sure everybody knew I'm not afraid of anything because I was terrified of everything. I had no inner strength, no idea of who I was going to be. If you ask me in my 50s, what are you scared of? I'll be like, God damn, do you have enough time? Let's sit down and talk about this. Okay, the economy. Okay, my kid's going to school, bullies at school. I'm going to get injured at jiu-jitsu. But here's the difference. I got off my stool when my face was caved in and I finished my last fight. I did not tap out. I got off my stool. My opponent TKO'd me, ended the fight. And I can carry that around saying, you know what? I've been through hard times. I've gotten off my stool. I know the kind of man that I am. So I don't need to advertise it. I don't need to tell everybody how brave I am because I know inside who I am. And I'll hear these tough guys on podcasts talking about stuff and all these things that they're going to do and how they're going to do this and all that. I was just like, man, get a hug. You're okay. You're doing enough. I was sitting behind Ken Shamrock at a UFC years ago, and Tito Ortiz had beaten somebody. And of course, he calls out Ken because that's going to be an easy fight for him. He's always going to win. And Ken loses his mind. He's throwing chairs and he's screaming. And I'm sitting behind him. I just wanted to go, Ken, you've done enough, man. You're good. You're good. I know you had a tough childhood and you had to fight to get where you are, but you're here now. You're respected. Believe in yourself. Believe in that strength that you have. Take a breath. If we can get our young men and women to that, and I think sports is a great way to do it. The military is, but at the same time, I'm against feeding into the massive military complex that we have in this country. But in sports and jiu-jitsu, in fighting, that's how I found my way. And it was a healthy way. That doesn't work for everybody because I also did the work. I was best friends with Robert Follis for quite a while. And he was always, we grew up the same way, raised in the abusive JW cult. And so he's always reading books and giving them to me to read to expand my understanding of who I can be and who I should be as a man, as a training partner, as a coach, as a father, as a husband, all of these things. If we can find ways to help these young people feel that same thing, and again, give them the opportunity by, I don't know, raising taxes on wealthy people so we can have better schools, so we can have the dream of owning a home, make that something that's reliable again. That's what the direction we need to move into.
You've mentioned a couple of times a lawsuit that you're involved in with the UFC. Now, I know the story, but a lot of people listening probably don't know the story. Can you give a background there?
Yeah, so when the UFC was started, the Fertitas and Dana White, they buy the UFC, and they will tell you they bought it for the three letters, the UFC, because it was a name. They bought the brand. Their goal was to make it like pro wrestling. And in pro wrestling, everybody knows it's a fantastic athletic display, but it's not a real sport. You don't have guys legitimately challenging for a title. On the UFC, I've never heard of a fight being fixed, but I have heard of guys not getting title shots that they deserved because the UFC didn't want to give it to them. So that's not sports, that's entertainment. The UFC has bragged about monopolizing the sport, buying up all the competition, firing the fighters they didn't like, firing the fighters that didn't toe the company line. And now we're in this place where the UFC, like during the two lawsuits that we have going, is the Lee case from 2010 to 2017, the Johnson case from 2017 onward. Same lawsuit, but two different time periods. We filed in 2014. The statute of limitations brought us back to December of 2010. And what we're saying is that the UFC has monopolized and monopsonized the sport. Monopolized meaning that's the only place where, that's the place where you go for your fights. Monopsonizing meaning that's the only place where fighters can sell their goods. Now, people will say, there's Bellator, there's other organizations. Cool. So I can start my own search engine and I'm a competitor with Google, right? No, a monopoly just controls the entire environment. Doesn't mean that they're making every single penny that's spent on this. However, in the Lee case, during the bad years, the UFC made around 94 cents out of every dollar spent on MMA worldwide. In the good years, it was closer to 97 cents. We had guys like John Fitch was one of the named plaintiffs. He was the number one contender for years. When he got his one title shot against George St. Pierre, he went the distance. He should get a rematch. But John Fitch was not a company man. When they said, hey, you need to sign over your likeness rights in perpetuity, if you don't sign right now, we're going to cancel your contract and cancel everyone's contract from AKA, American Kickboxing Academy. Now, at the time, I didn't even know what in perpetuity meant. And they use big words like that because if you say forever, even dummies like me can understand that. So they're trying to take our likeness rights and all of this forever, taking it away from us because they will never have enough. Again, the black soul that can only be filled with money, which is never completely filled. So a few of us, John Fitch, Kung Lee, Kyle Kingsbury, Brandon Vera, Javier Vasquez, we all said, we're willing to stand up and say, no, no more. And that's what we did. And we had this incredible team of lawyers. Rob Macy was really the driving force in all of it. When he was training in jiu-jitsu and he started hearing these stories about how underpaid the fighters were and how they were treated, he just couldn't believe it. Well, then Carlos Newton comes down and says, hey, so I'm going to spend a week with you and I'm going to discuss this all with you. And we call Carlos Newton Yoda because he is just this wealth of information and everything that he has to say. Got Rob Macy to understand this. Then Rob went to the best class action lawyers in the country and we started this lawsuit. And it was 12 years in the making. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And as the plaintiffs, as we're accusing the UFC of taking advantage of all these fighters, we have to win everything 100% of the time. And should we win in a court case, well, then they would appeal it and appeal it and appeal it forever. It seemed like the best course of action for us was to settle. And the UFC at first was not going to settle. The Lee case by itself, it said only the Lee case and the Johnson case will settle these both. Well, the Judge Boulware, who really understood the case, uh, however, he takes a long time to do stuff, but he really understood things in a way that no jury ever would, because from his point of view, he said clearly, this is a monopoly. This needs to be ended. And when we came to him with the settlement, he just said, I'm not going to accept this. This action needs to be changed, and you're not going to change anything here, so I'm not going to accept this. And the UFC came back and said, well, we're going to go ahead and settle the Lee case. You can move forward with the Johnson case. And all of us just stood up and cheered, because as much as we wanted to financially help the fighters that had been underpaid, more than anything, we wanted to change the sport. And those of us in the Lee case were not able to do that because, as the judge said, we'd all retired. You can't change a business when it doesn't affect the workers that are suing. But now that we have the Johnson case still moving forward, that's the case that we can use to try and change the sport. So it is a lot of moving parts. We hear all the time, well, why don't you guys unionize? Well, if we unionize, all that would do is cement the UFC as the number one promoter. And you'd have some bargaining whatsoever, but it would never hit the free market like is in boxing, the best apples to apples comparison. In boxing, the boxers get 85% of the purse. Promoters take 15%. Promoters are still rich, and they can do that forever. You can promote till you die. You have a small window for fighting. In MMA and the UFC, the promoter takes 85% of the money. The fighters get 15%, then split. And so we're trying to change that with the big difference between MMA fighters and boxers is the Ali Act. The Ali Act says that a promoter cannot hold the rank and title, cannot be invested in these fighters. When a promoter holds the title and holds the ranking, well, then they say, oh, John Fitch is the number one contender? No, he's not. He doesn't get a title shot. If you want a title shot, you're going to do all the interviews that we want you to. You're going to look like we want you to look. You're going to act how we want you to act. And you're going to sign a 10-fight, no-cut contract. You can't go anyplace else. You're with us for life. In boxing, they did away with all of that to where the champion actually fights the number one contender. And then you see who is the best fighter, because then the different promotions want to have their boxers box each other to see who is the undisputed champion in the world. And the UFC, and they have said this under oath, their champions are not necessarily the best fighters. They're the ones that they've just bestowed that belt for that night. So we were going back to DC to pass the Ali Expansion Act. And all it did was change the word boxer to combatant. So now MMA fighters, Muay Thai fighters, Jiu-Jitsu fighters, once the shows got big enough, these protections got in so that one company couldn't monopolize the entire sport. We had 58 signers on our bill. Obama was in office. We were moving forward. Everything was going great. We were working with a congressman by the name of Mark Wayne Mullen, who was a Republican. Mark Wayne Mullen was a former MMA fighter, and he said that it was his destiny, his vision, his duty to pass the Ali Expansion Act and change the sport because he loved it so much. This was his passion. And he was going to do this before he was in and out of office really quickly, because he just came to drain the swamp and then he's on his way. 58 signers to our bill. The original Ali Act had 16. The original Ali Act had more Democrats than Republicans. The Ali Expansion Act had more Republicans than Democrats. Well, then we had a change of occupants. Mr. Trump moved in, and our bill got killed in committee. And so all of that work that we had done was just squashed. Fast forward a few years, we have another change in occupancy in the White House. We go back to DC. We sit down with Senator Mullen, who is now gone from, I'm just going to quickly clean up the swamp as a congressman, to where now I'm Senator Mullen, and seems to really enjoy those $1 million stock trades that he seems to be making a lot of money off of, and will not reintroduce the Ali Expansion Act because it's not time. Because the Democrats don't want it. The Democrats are going to shut it down. And he told me to my face he would not reintroduce it with Trump in the White House. So we had a Republican congressman, now a Republican senator, who was our cheerleader and said that this was going to change the sport, was going to make it just better for fighters everywhere. He did not care about the promoter because this is what's best for workers. Now saying that if we try to go around him and pass the Ali Expansion Act, he will kill it. So it's been incredibly frustrating to me. I'm on a WhatsApp thread with about 500 fighters from the elite class, and to know how many of them are Trump voters and Trump supporters, when I'm sitting here going, what are the things that directly affect your life? For me, again, it was healthcare. It was the cost of goods, is the cost of good, all of these things. Oh, and it's also the Ali Expansion Act that would have dramatically changed the sport immediately and would have incredibly changed our lawsuit just as well. But here we are, stuck fighting the culture war instead of the class war.
And on that note, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I may be getting this information incorrect, but my understanding is that Dana is looking to move into boxing as well. And I think part of that is an attempt to repeal or revoke the Ali Act within boxing, isn't he? I heard something about this.
That is correct. They're looking to put an addendum or something on the Ali Act to where TKO can now have their own titles, their own ranking. And then again, they're gonna throw a bunch of money at it at the start, bring over some of these champions, and all the young up and comers will see this, see the fame, see those paydays. Well, I'm on my way. I'm gonna sign with the UFC or TKO or whatever they name it, not realizing that they've given the keys to the henhouse to the fox.
And they'll give it some wonderful branded name, like the right to fight legislation, kind of mirroring the anti-union legislation that's been passed in so many states, the right to work legislation. Isn't that a great name? Everybody has the right to work. How can
It's
you
like
be
the
against the
Patriot
right?
Act, right? How can you complain about that? Who's not patriotic?
Yeah.
Citizens United. We need to get all our citizens together. Doesn't that just mean we can funnel dark money and you can buy elections? Citizens United. My God. Hurts my head.
Man, well, on a happier note, tell us about the comic book stuff, Nathan. This I'm excited about. I've been waiting to hear about this for a whole hour now, and there you go. For those who can't see, Nate is standing up. He's got a shirt that says Zombie Cage Fighter on it. Want to explain the meaning of that, Nathan, just so everyone knows?
So, uh, MMA fighters, jiu-jitsu guys, martial artists, they're a bunch of nerds. You may not know it. They may be walking around pretending that they're tough. They're nerds, just maybe in a different genre. Growing up, I was a nerd. I was bullied and picked on, but man, I was an easy target. I had big, thick glasses, garage sale clothes, raised in a cult, not allowed to do sports. My escape was comic books. I got to live another life and just kind of disappear into that world and Star Wars, all of that. As I became a fighter and we're sitting around talking after practice, we start talking about movies and comic books and all these things. And you would just not believe how many of us are just nerds, comic book nerds, as well as martial arts nerds. And I started thinking, what would it be like for someone like me in that world? Now, I can't take out Spider Man or the Hulk. In the horror world, I can't take out a werewolf or Dracula. But I started thinking about zombies. Well, how would someone like me fight a zombie? Well, you can't knock him out if they're not going to tap out, but they're a mechanical being. If I start breaking things and tearing things, well, then that would be the end of that. So I kind of started brainstorming just some fight scenarios, me versus zombies types of things. And around this time, I'm a guest on a show called Attack of the Show, just this awesome pop culture show on G4, a channel that no
Yes.
longer exists, but I just love that show, and they'd have me on every once in a while. At the end of one of the episodes, they asked me what I was working on, what my next big thing was, meaning what my next fight was. And I said, well, right now, I'm working on Zombie Cage Fighter, and the rules are pretty simple. For humans, no biting. For zombies, mostly biting. And the producer comes up to me and he goes, that sounds amazing. I want to see everything you've got on it. So I looked him in the eye. I shook his hand and I said, all right, I'm going to fly back to Oregon, put together a pitch deck for you, and come back down and pitch it to you. Because I had nothing but an idea. So I get back home and I sit down at my old school brick computer, and I had a 12 pack of beer, I think, and I just started typing. And my computer was so old and busted that every once in a while it would freeze, and I'd have to like write down everything I just typed, restart my computer, and then retype it again. over and over and over again. But at the end, I had a 22-page treatment. I knew the beginning, I knew the end. I just had to fill out the middle. So I took it to some smart people and I said, hey, read this and give me some feedback. And they'd give me some pointers and I'd go, I like that. And I added in a love interest and this and that. And so I ended up with this story of Zombie Cage Fighter. And it's the story of my life plus zombies. What I went through as a fighter and at the time as a single father plus zombies. On my UFC career, I did okay. I won some, I lost some. I got very fortunate with some great sponsorships, and I'm still business partners with one of my sponsors from back in the day. I can honestly say my life has gone so far beyond anything I ever imagined that I'm eternally grateful. Well, in the zombie cage fighting world, I never quite make it over that hump. And I'm that fighter that we all know that reached the top and then had this slow slide back down to where he's back fighting at the local small shows. And right at the start of the graphic novel, Zombie Cage Fighter, I lose on one of the cards and the promoter comes up to me and he goes, man, you're done. I said, well, I'm a fighter. I don't know anything else. And he goes, let's be clear. You were a fighter. No one's excited to see your name on the card anymore. They're sad. You should have retired a long time ago. But if you're still hungry, I got some connections down to some show you might be interested in. And I get introduced to the underground zombie cage fights, where if you're willing to put your life on the line, they'll pay you a little bit more money. But if you lose, well, next week you're the main event as the zombie. And it's all about, if you take away the zombies, if you take away the MMA, it's about what a father is willing to go through to provide for his children. And I think that is just a timeless story. And that was my journey. I started fighting to change my life, what I thought was my destiny, to make something of myself, to find out what kind of a man I was. And I have a story. When I was a little boy, I was on the beach and the waves came in and I got trapped by the waves. And there was an older boy there with me. And he goes to grab my hand. He says, hey, when the waves go out, we need to run across the sand. Well, I'm like 5 years old. And I sit down in the sand and cry. And I thought about that for the next 15 years, nearly 20 years. When things get tough, will I sit down in the sand and cry or will I fight? And in my first fight, I stepped into the ring. I won my first fight. Like, okay, I know that I can stand up and I can fight. I can face this down. 22 fights later, I'm facing Jorge Rivera. He shatters my face in the first round. I'm sitting on my stool and Stitch is shoving the Q-tip up my nose with epinephrine. And he always drapes a rag in front of my mouth so I can't breathe. So I'm pushing the rag away and he goes, brother, you got to let me work. Your nose is broken. And I had this moment where I just thought to myself, man, you got no idea. My nose is broken. My cheekbone is broken. My septum is broken. I could move my cheekbone around my face. It was shattered so badly. And this little voice inside my head said, you should quit. When everybody sees how much damage you've taken, they won't mind. They'll understand. And then this big booming voice came over the top and said, if you quit on your stool, potentially end your career on your stool, you will consider yourself a fucking coward until the day you die. You are not that little boy crying on the sand. Get up and fight. And he's either going to knock you out or you're going to knock him out. One of those two things is going to fucking happen. Get up. And I got up and he TKO'd me within the first minute. And I stood up after the fight as I'm wandering around. I look down, one of my toes is pointing the wrong direction. I put it back in. It pops out. I put it back in. The ring doctor comes up and he goes, oh, your nose is broken. Most people don't have this thought. I hate doing interviews with a broken nose. So I look at him. I go, well, put it back in place. He goes, well, I can't do that. And I just looked at him and yanked my nose back in place. And I said, well, why are you even fucking here? And I go over there and they raised Jorge's hand. And I thought to myself, you know what? 22 fights, 18 wins, 4 losses. I've lost by decision, by knockout, by TKO, by submission. I've lost one of all 4 ways, but no one ever broke my heart. No one ever made me quit. I fought till I had nothing left. And that's the confidence that I have. I can say I'm afraid. I'm nervous. I'm going to go into this situation. That does scare me. But I know that I will follow through. I know that I will fight till I have nothing left. I know that I will get off my stool when my face is broken and the odds of me winning are next to nothing. That's something that I have inside of myself. And I think that's what most men these days are lacking. So they're looking for it by being loud, by being bullies, by having that big loud truck. All of these fake forms of bravado when all along it was inside. They just needed to find it amongst themselves. When Zombie Cage Fighter, that's the story that I presented. I'm just a man trying to feed my family. And if it takes facing down a zombie in a cage, so be it. That's my journey.
Well, Nate, I don't think we can end on a better note. How do people get their hands on the comic? How do people get in touch with you? And what's next for you?
Zombie Cage Fighter, zombiecagefighter.com. I've got awesome shirts and the graphic novel. Yeah, just reach me there. I'm more than happy to ship them out to you. Hopefully, at some point, it'll be a movie or an animated series or something like that. I think the story is strong enough that it belongs in there. I'm working on the sequel. First one took me 12 years. I've got the second one. I've got the start and the finish figured out. I'm working on the middle right now. Please be patient with me. But it's the coolest thing to go to a Comic-Con and have my booth, or to go to fights and have a booth there where I'm selling shirts and I'm selling comics. And I tell everybody, hey, uh, thank you for buying my book. Next time I see you, please tell me what you thought of it. And I have people coming up to me saying, oh my God, I love this book. I love this story. This is amazing. And that's the best feeling for me. Social media, I'm on Reddit here and there, just kind of a lurker mostly. I shut down my shitter account a while back. I was not going to be a part of the nonsense and the propaganda that's there. I'm over at Blue Sky now. Nate Rock Quarry, I think I'm there. Don't follow me. It's depressing. I'm just raging about how angry I am at politics. I try to put in humorous things every once in a while. I think I've got like 15 actual followers right now. I had probably, I don't know, 30 or 40,000 on Twitter, but it just wasn't worth it to me to support that brand. So once again, I just chose what I believed was the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences financially or whatever. Morally, I'm standing on my own 2 feet.
Awesome. Well, best of luck with everything you're going to do in your future, Nate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Nate. This is awesome.
Thank you.